Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, we travel to Belarus, a country trying to shed its Soviet image, but still keeping its media in a Soviet-style grip. We've got a 5-point primer on Belarusian media and a story on how so-called government support for musicians is actually working against the pop stars the state says it's trying to help. And there's one song that they're still singing in Minsk, an ode to President Lukashenko. Welcome back. This week, we've trained our lenses on the former Soviet Republic of Belarus. Unlike most of the old Soviet republics that distanced themselves from the Kremlin upon the collapse of the USSR, Belarus continues to swim against that tide by cozying up to Moscow. The country is strategically placed between Russia and the European Union, and its leader hasn't been west of Belarus's borders for over a decade. Belarus, under President Alexander Lukashenko, has a lamentable record on human rights and media suppression. However, there are signs Lukashenko's government wants to take steps to end its mostly self-imposed isolation from the West. In the first of two reports, here's the Listening Post's Simon Ostrovsky on the question of whether, when it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of the press, Belarus has really cleaned up its act.
This is what the United States considers to be the last dictatorship in Europe. And one man, President Alexander Lukashenko, has been its only ruler since it got independence from the Soviet Union. Now he says he wants to change the country's image and improve relations with the European Union. But how much has actually changed for the media when official news outlets can't criticize the leader and the newspapers that do dare face sanctions or have been forced underground? Belarus may want closer ties with the EU, but its most important partner is still Russia. So I decided to take part in the first official visit of Russia's new president. I wanted to find out how closely the media was allowed to scrutinize relations between the two sovereign states. Pavel Lyokhky is the Belarusian president's spokesman. He carefully choreographed the event to be picture perfect.
We will be working together, I hope productively. And I hope everything goes as planned for both you and for us.
He was very helpful when it came to shepherding journalists around. He even carried my cameraman's tripod. We're just waiting for the presidents to come out, and usually at official bilateral meetings like this one, all of the questions are vetted and predetermined. Generally, two journalists from each side, in this case, Russian and Belarus journalists, can ask 2 questions each. But since I'm not a member of either of those groups, I'm going to try and get an unsanctioned question in and see what happens. I was going to ask Lukashenko if there was still censorship in Belarus. But his spokesman had a different idea of what a journalist's role at a press conference should be.
Павел Николаевич, даже ни одного коротенького вопроса задать нельзя будет.
Про здоровье. Как ваше самочувствие?
Коллеги, ну мы договорились.
Так.
Давайте мы будем сотрудничать конструктивно. Ни одного вопроса.
Понятно.
Then, the big moment we'd all been waiting for.
То, что наше торгово-экономическое взаимодействие таким образом развивается.
The fact that our economic and trade relations are developing is a good foundation for development in other spheres of our cooperation, both in the social and economic area and in the development of our political vectors.
Our people have started living better. There are a lot of difficulties which will continue, but the result is that both Russians and Belarusians are better off. No one can deny that. Thank you. Goodbye.
At press conferences in Belarus, there's no time for questions. They talk, you listen. A new media law clamping down on newspapers and for the first time internet publications was being heard in Parliament. So I headed to the capital Minsk to find out how the rules the president was pushing for would affect the freedom of speech. This newspaper is actually called No Censorship.
No censorship, exactly.
I asked one of the leaders of Belarus's beleaguered opposition movement how unofficial media, known as samizdat in Soviet times, were going to cope. Do you think the new law is going to somehow affect the publication of these papers?
No, it's like in the Soviet Union people had samizdat, and of course the dangers for the people who distribute them would increase, but there are many people who are determined to fight with this kind of situation to the end, and they would not be scared by this law.
Well, I mean, you know, in Russia, if they were caught doing this in Soviet times, then people would have been sent to Siberia. I don't think that's going to happen now.
No, it's probably some of the most active people may be sentenced to at least maximum 2 years in prison, but that would be like huge economic fines plus confiscation of the papers, or like 15-20 days of imprisonment.
But many mainstream independent publications are likely to feel the heat from the new law. It bans them from receiving any foreign funding and requires internet news sites to register with the government.
They will use a lot of pretexts not to register you. They will, moreover, according to this law, they will have an opportunity to stop or to suspend the activity of internet media outlet just by the force of the administrative, not through by court, but by administrative order.
But even before this law came into force, just covering the news could be dangerous. At this opposition rally last March, photographer Andrei Lyankevich found out just how dangerous it could be.
I got, I think, 3 kicks in my nose and my head, and they crashed my light. It's very difficult to describe, you know, when you're pressed between like 50, maybe 60 really huge guys in black, and when you, because you know, all the time I was trying to say I'm a journalist, call to your, I know the names of the, you know, officers, the most important officers. I was trying to call them, like they were just laughing and kicking me, so it was like, you know, shocking situation.
Andrei ended up spending a night in jail. His crime? Reporting on an opposition rally. But the punishment meted out to Nasha Niva reporter Semyon Pechanko for the same offense was even harsher.
То есть и статья, по которой вас посадили на 15 суток, она подразумевала то, что вы оппозиционер и участник акции.
Да, в итоге, как бы в протоколе и в суде было записано, что я был активным участником данного мероприятия, возможно, размахивал флагом, выкрикивал антигосударственные лозунги «Живе Беларусь».
Вы делали эти вещи?
Нет.
Then I went to see the editor of Belarus's biggest newspaper. It's backed by the country's president and retains its Soviet-era masthead. He certainly hasn't faced the same problems as his independent-minded colleagues, but there is a catch.
I can't criticize the activities of the president, because the president and his administration is a co-owner of my newspaper.
Тогда какая ее функция?
Its purpose is the same as any other newspaper. But I don't know a single paper in the world or a single TV station out there that can sharply criticize its owner. I don't know of such a newspaper. If you name me one, you will expand my conception of journalism and the modern world.
I came here with an open mind, hoping the president was actually trying to change things for the better. But as my papers were checked outside of the Parliament building, I realized this country has a long way to go before it casts off its Soviet image.
Our Global Village voices now with their take on Belarusian media and their prospects for freedom.
It's very difficult for people to operate as independent journalists in Belarus because their activities are restricted every which way they turn. And so the way journalism is impeded is by petty rules which are applied with a heavy hand. And that in many ways is much more problematic than dramatic disappearances and arrests and searches of people's property, but they happen too.
Belarus has the highest number of internet users in the former Soviet Union. And the government is realizing this. The government is now actively filtering content information You're obliged to register if you're using an internet cafe. The future for Belarus doesn't look too bright.
Alexander Lukashenko's control over media bears all the hallmarks of a classic dictatorial approach. In the short term, yes, he might silence some of the media, but certainly in the medium and certainly in the long term, those tactics will not yield fruit.
Our Global Village Voice platform is your chance to tell us what you think about the media in Belarus or anywhere else in the world. If you have an opinion on the media, email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net and we'll find a way to get your voice on the air. Belarus is not exactly a global media player. There's a lot we don't know about the media there, and that's just how President Lukashenko likes it. So here's the Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi with a quick look at the media landscape in Minsk.
Satirical cartoons such as this one have roused the anger of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Created by a group of activists who call themselves the Third Way Initiative, the cartoons first appeared on the internet in 2005 and sparked off legal proceedings by the government. Third Way Initiative was charged under Article 367 of the Belarusian Criminal Code with the crime of insulting the president. No verdict was reached, but 3 of the artists who helped create the cartoons have now chosen to live in exile in neighboring countries, Poland and Estonia. Director Yuri Chachavatsky's best-known film is Kalinovsky Square, and its ironic presentation of Belarus's 2006 presidential elections won him not only greater recognition in the region, but the continued disapproval of the Lukashenko government. The president and the director are constantly at odds with each other, despite the fact that Chachavatsky shares a pet peeve with Lukashenko, the national media.
Ясность поперла бурным потоком по всем государственным телеканалам. Ну, тренироваться надо. Факел зажег президент. Да, газ – это хорошо.
Зрелище было захватывающим. Александр Лукашенко лично сел за руль самого большого в мире самосвала.
Independent television was non-existent in Lukashenko's Belarus until Poland stepped up to the challenge late last year. Belsat is the country's only channel which has no connections to the national government, and it's produced by Polish Public TV and funded by the Polish government. It broadcasts in Belarusian for 6 hours each day, and its motto is Belsat, your right to choose. Unsurprisingly, President Lukashenko is not a fan and has described the channel as a stupid and uncongenial project. One medium the government has been slow to control has been the internet. The country has a relatively high level of internet penetration at 57%, and latest figures from the national internet service provider, Bell Telecom, state that nearly 20% of the population access the web. However, online freedom is unlikely to last long, as shown by the recent new law requiring internet publications to register with the state. Increasingly repressive laws, police intimidation of journalists, and state control of much of the media mean that Belarus comes in at 151 in Reporters Without Borders' annual Worldwide Press Freedom Index, the lowest position of any country from the European continent. It also puts President Lukashenko on the organization's list of press freedom predators.
We're back after the break with a story on the Belarusian music industry's strange dilemma: too much support from the state.